This is an anniversary year, and I would just show this man here for you, Hermod Nannung, who is his foundation is the sponsor of this gathering here, and he was until his death almost 101 years old, the chairman of the Danish-Russian Federation Association, of which I am the chairman, in addition to being the chairman of the Danish Helsinki Committee. Sometimes I've been asked, how can you be in the Danish Helsinki Committee and being in a Danish-Russian association? And I say I see no contradiction whatsoever. And I was very happy that we had this introduction of the Moscow-Helsinki group, because it has been a great inspiration for other Helsinki groups, and particularly for the Danish Helsinki group. I had, when I became the chairman, the pleasure to be together with both Orlov and Alexeyeva in Helsinki when there was the celebration of the International Helsinki Federation in 2007. Unfortunately, due to fraud, the federation was dissolved at that occasion, but work is going on, and this concentration on human rights and particularly fair elections is something which we are taking much notice of. Another thing, an organization with whom we have been working for quite a long time is the Soldatskие Materi, the soldiers' mothers, which perform a very difficult, very important work of human rights for conscript soldiers against the harassment of recruits and other things in the Russian army. Unfortunately, this cooperation is now very difficult because of the foreign agent laws, and that is really something which is a great loss for civil society. Another thing which is very important is actually that, taking another anniversary, the reason why I actually studied Russian language and the reason why I involved myself in many ways with Eastern Europe was that I'm a child of the Second World War, and for me the Hitler system was one of the greatest evils of mankind. And I was felt as a young boy greatly grateful to the Russians, because without the Russians, Hitler had probably been victorious. And I think that even during this crisis, you have to remember here in the 70th year of the victory over Hitler, that all the sacrifices made by the Russians and other peoples of the Soviet Union in simply wearing the war machine of Hitler down. That was, of course, in a combination with the Americans, the British, and also a few Danes who voluntarily took part on that side. But it is very, very important to remember that we had a joint venture there to fight one of the worst political systems we have ever seen. This spirit of cooperation was in some way reiterated 40 years ago when we had a slide of the signing of the Helsinki Final Act in 1975. This combination of security policy and human rights was perhaps one of the most explosive agreements made, and should remember us that what brought down the Soviet Union, and I don't see it as a catastrophe that it was brought down. On the contrary, that was due to the Russians. They actually, and Boris Yeltsin in 91 opted Russia out of the Soviet Union, actually. And looking at this perspective, what happened was that dissension was made more open, was in fact something which could be organized in another way after the Helsinki Agreement. It is curious that the Americans didn't then see, many of them, and definitely not Kissinger, the potential of the Helsinki Agreement. Gerald Ford forced the agreement through in his administration, but it turned out to be a very important remedy for groups working in Russia, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, and the other countries, in order to point at all the harassments, shortcomings, a violation of human rights, which happened within the whole sphere of, you could say, the communist empire of Eastern Europe. One of the reasons why I took an interest in that part of Europe was that it was very much ignored during the Cold War. It was like the borders of Europe stopped in the outskirts of Lübeck. There the DDR started, and most of my age didn't actually bother what happened there. I thought it was very, very wrong, and that was what actually made me studying Russian and other Eastern European languages, and later working with these countries and working at integrating them scholarly in scholarly work, particularly within media, within film, and other things. But in 1990, we had the fall of the Berlin Wall, or actually the development of the Copenhagen criteria, which was part of the Paris Agreements of 1990, the basis of unification of Germany, but also the formulation of criteria which became for the European Union the criteria for being admitted to the European Union, that is good governance, fair elections, human rights, and a series of important demands for states who wanted to join the club, you could say, of the European Union. And that was something which was made possible by the dissolution of the communist bloc in Eastern Europe, and something which, in many ways, I found that the reason why it was relatively peaceful in the Soviet Union, whereas Yugoslavia went down into a hell of ethnic conflict, the difference was the difference between vodka and Slivovica, because there was a more peaceful way of dealing with these things in a civilized way in the former countries of the Soviet Union. Actually, as we've seen after the turn of the millennium, the development has not been so positive in neither in the post-Soviet sphere, and we have met new and very serious challenges. But going back 15 years, when I was an election observer for the OSCE, in Rostov-na-Donu, when Mr. Putin was elected president of the Russian Federation, and also when I was at the Duma elections in Novosibirsk. At that time, the elections, where I was at least, were really fair and good. You could discuss your election campaign, but I remember in Rostov-na-Donu, which was in the red belt, that there was an outcome for Mr. Putin of 62%. And I found that it was curious. I counted all the votes, so I know it was right. But I couldn't understand it, and my facilitator and interpreter, she was a communist, and I asked her, what did you actually vote? And then she said, well, I voted for Putin. I thought you were a communist, I asked her. Oh, no. Well, of course I am. But I wanted to vote for an uncompromised, young, healthy, and not drinking man. And that was her image of Putin. Nobody knew very much on Putin, but they knew a lot of all the other candidates. And that was actually, Putin got the benefit of the doubt. Later, I became, 10 years ago, the chairman of the Danish-Russian Association. And in that connection, we had cooperation with various organizations in Russia, and in this connection, we had a series of conferences. We have an annual conference in the Danish Parliament on the relationship between Danish and Denmark and Russia. A line of conferences where we take up topics like human rights, democracy in Russia, and such themes. And one year the theme was democracy, question mark, a village in Russia, question mark. And actually, at that time, in the beginning of the zeros, I would say, well, there was quite a lot of democracy locally in the Russian Federation. I made it in Siberia. I made it at curious places. Also, the cooperation we have had with NGOs in the Arkhangelsk region, where they have worked very well with the local communal authorities. That was really good, solid work. And one of the things I have returned to is working for giving another image of the Russians. And that is very important in this connection now, because there is a tendency to be disappointed with the Russians because of Putin, because of Crimea, because of Ukraine. Say, well, when they are all backing him. Now he has come on almost 90%. This means that they want a strong man. They cannot be democratic. They are helpless. We believe that they could be democratic, but they cannot. And there you have to inform people that you cannot trust the Poles, as we heard earlier today. The Poles is part of the game. It is part of a game of giving the impression in the outside world that there is an identity between Putin as the good Tsar and the Russian Orthodox Church and the great community, and then this hostile world surrounding Russia as a fortress. And this idea is breaking down contacts between Russia and the outside world unless we fight against it. And in particular, that we are very considerate of telling about conferences like this, telling about all the very important and valuable contacts you will have, both scholarly, politically, and the other ways, with a lot of Russians. So I see this as a very important thing to do, both for the Danish Helsinki Committee. We are also working with Ukraine, of course, and Belarus, and for the Danish Russian Association. Thank you.